Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
3 Democratic mayors leading blue cities in the decidedly red states of South and North Carolina, here with us today to discuss challenges and opportunities for their constituents and the broader region. Our dialogue during the Carolina Business Review Annual Mayor's Roundtable is sure to be spirited and wide-ranging. Urban renewal, economic growth, social reforms, political power, and so much more. Welcome to the most widely watched source for Carolina business and public policy. I'm Diane Bailey, filling in for Chris William. Today, we are honored to welcome to the program South Carolina Mayors Steve Benjamin of Columbia and Stephen Wukela of Florence, and North Carolina Mayor Esther Manheimer of Asheville. Please stay with us.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded August 8th, 2014. This week's program features Carolina mayors. From the city of Columbia, Steve Benjamin. The city of Asheville, Esther Manheimer. And from the city of Florence, Stephen Wukela.
Welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being here. In the opening, I mentioned that each of you is a Democrat in a state largely controlled by Republicans. I'm wondering if we can open the conversation today talking a little bit about where power really resides these days. Is it in the states, on the local level? Esther, perhaps I could bring you in first to talk a little bit about the controversy related to Asheville's water system, for example.
That's a good question. Where does the power lie in North Carolina? And I think it really depends on the area you're talking about, what the subject matter is. But we are certainly in North Carolina feeling the tension between the state and local governments. We have a legislature that is dominated by the Republican Party right now, which happens to have a majority of its representatives representing rural areas. And when the controlling party has a majority of its representatives representing rural areas, it has resulted in a tension between cities and the state government.
Steve, I could bring you in. You recently made a pronouncement about Columbia being a sanctuary city. Some tension there with your governor's position on this issue.
Sure. It's more so, and I think I'd go back to your earlier question. Obviously, the power resides with the people. The reality is that if you look across America, mayors are getting things done. Washington, D.C. may be broken. Sometimes state governments are dysfunctional. But on the ground level, our constituents, both Republican, Democrats, Independents, those who choose not to affiliate with anyone, expect us to get things done, the basic services of government, and recognizing the fact that 94% of America's gross domestic product is happening in metro economies that are supported by strong urban economies. People expect us to lead, and we decide that while things may not be happening in Washington or not happening in our state capitals, that we still have to get things done. We did wade into the discussion regarding unaccompanied minors and children coming here from Central America. And it was more a restatement of our purpose, our ideals. When Columbia was founded in 1786, Senator John Lewis Gervais of 96 had a wonderful phrase. The proponents of naming Columbia Washington were winning. And at that time, the name Columbia was not necessarily a derivation of Columbus. It was more synonymous with America. And he had a great quote that he hoped the oppressed of every land would be able to find refuge under the wings of Columbia. And that was an opportunity, I believe, for our city to step up and say that this is a major international issue that's more of a result of our inaction on immigration. And this is a chance for us to say that while so often some intolerant words are assigned to certain orators from our state, it was our chance to say that we're a great place, a progressive city of the New South.
Clearly, there are issues of the struggle of power on all levels of government, federal, state, and local. Stephen, do you find this tension in South Carolina to be an impediment to attracting new businesses?
Well, it certainly is. I think what Mayor Benjamin alludes to is precisely correct. I mean, what we've seen from the federal level and to a large part from the state level in South Carolina is just inaction. And what happens is the obligation to recruit industry, to provide the infrastructure necessary to do business, to do all forms of economic development, fall to mayors, fall to cities. And, a good example of that is road infrastructure. I mean, in South Carolina, the governor has opposed increasing the gas tax, although we have a 16-cent gas tax in South Carolina. And in North Carolina, it's more than double that. And we've got $30 billion worth of road improvements that need to be made over the next 20 years that aren't being made. And those obligations, those infrastructure, basic forms of infrastructure fall to the cities. Another example is the city of Florence has just recently built a $100 million wastewater treatment plant, necessary to be able to provide the water and sewer infrastructure to allow industry to locate in South Carolina. The federal government had a water bill that languished for so long that it was just impossible for us to wait for that bill to pass to hope for any kind of federal assistance there. So once again, that obligation fell to the cities and fell to my taxpayers, who are also incidentally federal taxpayers as well, although we didn't see that benefit.
Let's jump to a higher level and talk about the economy. So in Asheville, how do you compare the economy today with where you were a year ago, and how do you look ahead into 2015?
I think for Asheville, we are lucky that we are enjoying a robust economy, a low unemployment rate. We're seeing a lot of businesses interested in locating there. And I think this is part of the changing dynamic across the country where, things may not be happening at a state level, they may not be happening at a federal level, but there are things cities can do to make them the place that companies want to locate. So for Asheville, a lot of that has to do with placemaking. Businesses come to Asheville and they say, we want to be in a place where our employees want to live. We want parks and greenways and recreation, and we want a beautiful setting. We want good food, and we want quality of life.
Good beer.
Good beer.
Right.
That's right. So they it's not just what are the incentive packages that you can put together for me, and I can look at tax grants and things like that. That's not really the top thing that's happening in these discussions about whether or not businesses will locate in your community.
Let's talk about what's happening in Columbia. We've had a lot of conversation about the renaissance of cities and urban renewal, a lot coming down the pike in your city. Tell us a little bit more.
We have almost $1 billion under development and construction as we speak. We focus intently on the fact that Columbia is the center of a great region, and our focus has been regional, recognizing we're stronger as a region. But Columbia is a core, and people have a wonderful romantic relationship with their Main Street, with their downtown urban corridor. So we've invested heavily in streetscaping and placemaking and architectural enhancements, and it's amazing what's come. This week, we're tripling our downtown population with new high-end student housing coming to Main Street, a formerly vacant 450,000 square foot building. It's bringing life to Main Street, 10 new restaurants in the past year. Our citizens also stepped up, just as the citizens of Florence have, in investing $1.2 billion in a new transportation infrastructure, parks and greenways, and all of that is coming to pass now. We're seeing the fruits of our labors. Obviously, seeing the repurposing of our former Bull Street mental health property. It's going to be anchored by a brand new multi-purpose venue, baseball stadium, that we went up to Durham recently to spend some time with them and see how it's led the renaissance of Durham. It's our time, and when cities thrive, the entire region thrives, and we're excited that Columbia is seeing that renaissance now.
Florence is not sitting on the sidelines. You've got your own projects, and comment a little bit about those and also about how it impacts the region more broadly.
Sure. Well, and Florence sees precisely the same thing. We've been inspired by what's going on in places like Greenville and Asheville and Columbia and Charleston, and we have spent a lot of money and time working on our downtown over the last few years. We've constructed a new performing arts center, a new museum, a new library. As a result, we've seen new hotels and restaurants come into downtown, and you see that energy coming back into the core of your city that you had lost before, frankly. And to be further frank, we've lost industry because of having lost that core of downtown, and we appreciate that. We identified that, and as a result, I think the Florence has had a significant amount of energy towards moving towards that revitalization and making Florence a place that not only has a great quality of life for the people who live there, but also lures industry and lures people from outside.
Let's talk a little bit more about regionalism. Esther, you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation the legislature in North Carolina being really controlled by folks with the point of view of the rural communities. And we've been talking today as city mayors about that focus on the urban core. How do you see those two sets of interests being complementary for the greater good?
Sure. I'd be happy to start about that. The legacy of the South is that we were primarily rural, and we've seen these great urban centers grow over the last several decades. As a result, in South Carolina, the legislature is still very strong. The governor has increasing power with every succeeding governor. But that power is passed down to counties, and very little statutory authority in both our states actually resides in cities. So we find ourselves being very creative, trying to create the environment for us to be successful. Great partnerships like Stephen's put together with Francis Marion University that's using this collective power to grow our cities. But it's a natural tension. We find ourselves using some of the tools, multi-county industrial parks and fee in lieu of tax statutes that are designed primarily for industrial recruitment outside of the urban core, and using them in a way that benefits us. But the way that we also control our water and sewer system in our region, and we recognize that we want to keep people downtown. We want to keep white collar jobs downtown. But if we were to land a large industrial potential recruit, they won't land in the corporate limits of the city of Columbia. They'll be in Richland County or Lexington County, and it's our job to work with them in partnership so that the jobs are there, so our people can have wonderful opportunities. So it encourages us to constantly dialogue. We set up a regional mayors group when I first became a mayor, in which we also invite the chairs of our county council, and we meet every couple of months, and no major agenda, but it's just having the dialogue, building the trust, so when the opportunities come, we have a chance to do some things together. But it does require constant work to keep that level of productive dialogue going.
Would you say your experiences are similar?
I think collaboration is the name of the game. Nobody can operate in a vacuum anymore. Asheville has 86,000 people in it, but our larger area is 250,000 people. So, we work together with the counties, the surrounding counties, the surrounding cities, and we also work with private partners within the area. And I don't think that we would be able to achieve what we've achieved without strong collaboration across the region.
And that's true across party lines as well. It's been my experience. I suspect it's these mayors' experience. On the local level, as Mayor Benjamin alluded to, we don't have an enormous amount of statutory authority in South Carolina. So as a result, you have to be practical, you have to be pragmatic, you have to build those coalitions to achieve things. Florence, like Columbia, runs water and wastewater for the entire region. And so we're integrally connected into the lower part of the county and to the rural areas, and understand our obligation to provide that service and to make it possible for industry to locate where it does, which is frankly not within the city, but in the outlying regions.
So we're hearing a positive story about your local economies. I hope that is translating to increased tax collections. Tell me if I'm right. And with that assumption, test it for me though, are you expanding services? Are you taking on infrastructure projects? What are your plans?
Let me speak to
Yes.
that first. The fact of the matter is we have seen somewhat marginally, we're not in the negative anymore. If you look back 5 years, I think on balance maybe we've seen slight growth over the last 5 years, but we're coming out of this horrible malaise and recession. But frankly, the cities in South Carolina are an enormous amount of restraint from state government as to how much revenue you can collect. For example, the city of Florence is just getting ready to do a every 5-year reassessment of property values. Property values have seen, in spite of the recession, an increase of about 2 or 3% over the last 5 years. But by statute, even though we have that reassessment, we do have a little bit more revenue. We have to reduce the millage and return that revenue back to the taxpayers, and are subject to some pretty draconian caps as far as the increased revenue that's available, even because of growth. That occurs even though an enormous amount of mandates come down from the state as far as what has to be provided, particularly on counties more so than cities. But that's a situation that exists in South Carolina where, even though, perhaps I'm biased, but even though I believe that the cities are producing a lot of results and are generating some growth, we're still dampened significantly by state requirements. Is that your experience?
And I would add, in North Carolina, the way this works is cities primarily rely on property tax revenue. They get some percentage of the sales tax revenue, and then there's fees on top of that. Asheville also doesn't enjoy receiving any of the hotel tax. Now, people find that sort of shocking, but Asheville's a little unique in that regard. This differs from other states across the country. Some cities have to rely solely on sales tax primarily. So that's the mix. Well, if you look at the growth in Asheville, it's been steady. But what we realized with, and I think even businesses experience this, the overhead costs to run your business aren't necessarily going to keep up with revenue at the status quo. So what plan can you put in place to make sure that you are ensuring the fiscal viability of your city, not relying on the state, not relying on the federal government, because you can't do that anymore. And so what we've done is put in place a very aggressive capital improvement investment program, which is a program focused on investing in infrastructure in the city to prepare it to be shovel ready for private investment. And also to grow those things I was talking about earlier, those amenities, those lifestyle amenities that are so important to people and that really feed into a thriving economy. So those are the steps we've taken to shore ourselves up for the long term and keep ourselves in the black, which is where we are, but to be able to create a sustainable revenue source so that we can provide the amenities that people live for and enjoy.
We're very proud of 5 years of budget surplus. It goes hand in hand with 5 wins over Clemson University. It's amazing how that flows.
That's not fair.
7 years without a tax increase, and no tax increase anywhere in sight. We've been good stewards of taxpayer dollars. We are seeing increases in our collections. Our police department funding is at a record high. We're investing heavily in our parks. Investing heavily in our water and sewer infrastructure. Years of deferred maintenance have put us to a point where we're spending about $1 billion on the future. And Mayor Manheimer's right. These smart investments in infrastructure serve as a catalyst for private sector investment, and we're going to continue making those investments as we move forward.
As I sit back and look at the talent at this table, I'm so grateful that each of you has stepped up and are willing to serve in such important leadership roles in your communities. how can we create a climate that encourages others to follow and serve along with you, and to really take the leap into public service?
Everyone smiles when you say that.
I think you're biased because we're all lawyers and you're
The best of the best. But really, I'm impressed by your willingness and your capacity and your leadership. And how did you get here? How can others be encouraged to follow behind you?
Well, I think I was raised with a commitment to public policy and public service. My father served in World War II and had to get out of a Higgins boat with machine gun fire. I didn't have to do any of that. But my family instilled in my brothers and I an obligation towards our community. And we're all lawyers. We've all been successful. I think all of us feel an obligation to return something as a result of that success, and we're in the position where we can do that sort of thing. Unfortunately, I think a problem that you will find is that a lot of people who would be very good public servants and who would do an excellent job and should be involved in public service can't, because of the time obligations, because of the monetary obligations. And I think that restricts a lot of good people who would otherwise, I think, be very good leaders. And frankly, of late, and this has come down from the national level, but this sense of vitriol and anger that seem to have infected our politics also, it causes a lot of young people particularly to distance themselves from politics because they don't want to be involved in that kind of rancor.
I think that's very true, and it's unfortunate. I mean, when I speak to students, I do encourage them to get involved in their community and to start somewhere. You don't have to run for public office, tomorrow, but you could volunteer to participate in something in your community. Maybe volunteer to be on a committee or get involved in the leadership in your high school or wherever you are. I mean, that's how I think it starts for any politician. In the beginning, they got involved in something and that got it going. And I don't necessarily think that it's everyone's calling to serve in an elected office. But a lot of people have a lot to contribute to our community. And Asheville is a funny place. I think we just placed in the top 10 in volunteerism per capita. So, I'm sort of preaching to the choir there, but I do it anyway. So I think it's really important for everyone to get involved in and to contribute positively. There is a lot of cynicism and negativity surrounding politics, and I think that is very unfortunate. And it's also cheapened the role, and that is. That's terrible for those that are truly qualified and very earnest and determined to serve their community.
Very deep and rich talent pool in both of our states. I often talk about I want Columbia to be the most talented, educated, and entrepreneurial city in America. And I know we can get there, quite frankly, because I know exactly the kind of people we have there. Encouraging those folks of all stripes to be involved in helping shape their community. Doesn't necessarily have to be in elective office. Hopefully, many of them will consider it. But we've reached out actively and aggressively to pulling people into every endeavor that we try to do, particularly young people. We have a fellows program. It's a volunteer program in which we have college students, both undergraduate and postgraduate. We've had 120 of them come intern in our office for a semester, learn more about civics and responsibilities of public life, and hopefully we're creating some and they've been literally from across the spectrum, from left to right, but all committed to helping improve their community, and hopefully we'll have a nice strong bench of young people who want to help continue changing America.
You all are tremendous role models. I have no doubt that folks will follow behind. There is never enough time for this program. And we wanted to dig deep into the budgets in your respective states and the legislative agenda. Let's just look forward. One item at the top of your wish list for the next legislative session. One.
If I could pick one, Medicaid expansion. Florence has a huge healthcare population, and those dollars would be critically important to us.
I'm going to have to say ditto to that. That is an important issue for North Carolina, and it will make a major change financially, not only for the availability of services to our community and our citizenry, but also for our hospitals who are struggling to provide the services.
Can I get a ditto out of you?
Comprehensive tax reform.
Comprehensive tax reform. I'll take that. To each of the mayors joining us today, thank you. Your insights are important and sincerely appreciated. And to our viewers, we thank you for joining the conversation and wish you the best. Until next week.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.